Okay, let's dive into this. We've got a Dutch foreign minister hitting out at Israel pretty publicly.
Yeah, and then boom, the leader of the biggest coalition party just explodes on social media.
Right, and this isn't just, your standard political back and forth. It feels like it hints at something much deeper going on.
Absolutely. We're drawing this from a recent discussion over on NPO Radio 1's YouTube channel. And what struck me is how it's not just about foreign policy.
Hmm.
It really looks like a potential crack, right down the middle of the Dutch government itself could affect stability.
Exactly. So for you listening, we're going to unpack this political situation. Our mission today, really get to grips with what the minister actually criticized.
And then Wilder's reaction, that whole firestorm online.
Yeah, and what it all means, for Dutch politics, their place internationally. You might be surprised by some of the dynamics at play here in coalition government.
So the first thing is, what exactly did Foreign Minister Veldkamp say? What was the trigger?
Well, the discussion highlighted that Veldkamp stated pretty clearly, actually, that because of the Gaza blockade, Israel isn't really respecting human rights or democratic principles anymore.
Wow, that's quite direct, especially on the world stage.
It is. And he didn't just leave it there. He actually pushed for the EU to formally investigate the whole situation.
Right, calling for an EU investigation. That's a significant step.
Yeah, the NPO commentators use this Dutch word dry, which sort of means a big U-turn or at least a very public change in direction for their foreign policy.
You don't often see governments calling for investigations into nations they generally consider allies, do you?
Not usually, no.
Yeah.
It's a substantial diplomatic move. Could have, well, big consequences.
And speaking of consequences, that brings us straight to Geert Wilders, leader of the PVV, the biggest party.
Yep. His reaction on X, formerly Twitter, it just dominated the headlines, became huge focus.
You could tell he was furious, and the media jumped right on it. What specifically did his tweets say?
Well, one was aimed right at the prime minister, Scoof, questioning if these ridiculous anti-Israel measures, as he put it, from Veldkamp, had the whole cabinet's okay.
Asking if everyone was on board beforehand.
Exactly. He was like, were all the ministers told? Was there an official cabinet decision backing this up?
That's interesting. Challenging the PM directly like that, it sort of implies a lack of cohesion right there, doesn't it?
It really does. Wilders was demanding clarity on the government's official line, the justification for Veldkamp saying what he did.
And it's important context, which the discussion brought up, that Wilders himself is known for being very strongly pro-Israel.
Oh, absolutely. So that contrast makes this public clash even starker, really.
Which then leads to this whole other conversation about social media, right? And leaders like Wilders using it this way.
It does. They talked about the media's dilemma. How seriously do you take Wilder's tweets when he doesn't often talk directly to the press, like through interviews or conferences?
Yeah, it's tricky because, okay, maybe they're just his opinions posted online. But he is the leader of the largest coalition party.
Exactly. So his words carry weight, politically speaking. They can shift the narrative.
Which brings us right to the heart of it, doesn't it? This whole thing just lays bare a really clear divide, a difference of opinion inside the ruling coalition.
Definitely.
Yeah.
You got the head of the biggest party apparently disagreeing very publicly with his own government's minister on a major foreign policy point.
And it's not like this came from nowhere. The NPO discussion reminded us Wilders himself talked about two PVVs before.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. Like one PVV in the cabinet and another one in parliament.
Exactly, which just raises all sorts of questions about alignment and what the consequences are when they don't seem aligned.
Right. Like who's actually driving the bus for his party? And what does that mean for the government holding together? This is where Prime Minister Scoof comes in.
Yeah, the feeling from the commentary was definitely that Scoof needs to step up. He needs to address this apparent split in his cabinet publicly. It's a real test for him.
They were quite specific, too, pointing to the next cabinet meeting, saying the crucial questions for Scoof afterwards will be, did you talk about this Israel letter beforehand?
And crucially, do all the PVV ministers in the cabinet actually back what Veldkamp said?
Yeah, and the implication was clear. If Scoof can't give a straight yes to that,
then that signals a pretty serious problem, doesn't it? A lack of unity on something really important.
suggests the government is speaking with one voice internationally. And the follow-up question they raised was, well, if PVV ministers don't support this policy,
Can they realistically stay in the cabinet? It goes right to the core of collective responsibility, that idea of cabinet unity.
definitely. So, okay, let's think about Veldkamp himself. Why take this strong public stance now? What might be the motivation?
That's a good question. The analysis suggested he might have been feeling quite a bit of pressure from inside his own ministry.
Ah, like from diplomats and civil servants concerned about the situation in Gaza.
Exactly. That the humanitarian picture was getting so bad, his own people were pushing for a stronger line.
Which kind of fits, because they also noted he hasn't typically been someone looking for big public fights on this, maybe preferring quiet diplomacy.
Right. More behind the scenes stuff usually. But perhaps the situation on the ground in Gaza just reached a point.
A tipping point, yeah,
Yeah.
where he felt he had to, quote, show something publicly in response, make a stand.
Okay, so flip side. What about Wilder's motives for reacting so strongly and publicly?
Well, the take from the discussion was it's probably not just about his support for Israel, though that's obviously there.
Okay, so what else?
The suggestion is it's also aimed at, well, undermining the cabinet's policy here, maybe even deliberately causing some internal chaos or conflict within the government.
That's quite a charge. Is that a known tactic?
Apparently.
Mm.
They drew parallels, saying criticizing coalition partners publicly before a cabinet meeting has sometimes been seen as a way to weaken the government's position or stir things up internally.
So it's seen less as expressing an opinion and more as a direct challenge to that core principle of cabinet unity.
Exactly, that fundamental idea that the government, especially on foreign policy, should speak with one voice.
Which is just vital for governing effectively, right? You need that united front.
You do.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where you really see the strain in coalition politics, isn't it? How do you keep that unity when the parties involved have genuinely different, deeply held views on sensitive stuff?
Yeah, the normal process of internal debate and compromise seems to have been, well, short-circuited here with this very public spat.
Totally. And there's another angle they brought up, too, the speed often needed in foreign policy.
Ah, right. That they can't always wait for everyone in a coalition to reach perfect consensus before acting.
Especially, the argument goes, when you're dealing with something as urgent as the humanitarian crisis in Gaza.
The situation there might demand a quicker response from the foreign minister, even if it ruffles feathers internally.
Yeah, the point being, maybe the focus should be more on the actual events in Gaza, not just the political reactions back home.
So pulling this all together for you, our listener, what's the main thing to take away from this deep dive?
I think the biggest takeaway is seeing this really significant, very public disagreement break out within the Dutch ruling coalition, specifically over Israel policy.
Yeah, it throws that whole issue of cabinet unity into sharp focus and makes you wonder about the government's direction, its stability even.
It's definitely unusual, isn't it? For the leader of the biggest coalition party to seem so openly at odds with a major foreign policy statement from their own government.
That dynamic is the surprising bit here. It really deviates from how these things normally look from the outside, that image of a united government.
So why should you care about this, even if Dutch politics isn't your usual beat? Well, I think it highlights those universal challenges of coalition government, you know.
Definitely. That constant balancing act between domestic politics and international human rights issues.
And also the role social media now plays in politics, how it can just amplify disagreement to disrupt things. These aren't just Dutch problems.
No, they're relevant everywhere. It really makes you think, doesn't it, about the broader impact when governments have these kinds of public internal fights.
How does it affect their ability to actually govern, to tackle the big issues, nationally and internationally?
It's something worth considering, perhaps looking into how other coalition governments handle these pressures.
And maybe here's a final thought for you to chew on. We live in this age of instant news, social media, really strong opinions.
Yeah.
How could any government, anywhere, realistically maintain that united front when dealing with incredibly complex, sensitive, and often polarizing international crises?
That's a tough one. How do you balance transparency and debate with the need for coherent action? It's a huge question, far bigger than just this one situation in the Netherlands, right?